Alright, let's return to our road to 1975 World Championship. And we are going into the still in the Leningrad 1973 round 1. Now let's look at Guillermo Estevez Morales versus Karpov, the Interzonal tournament in Leningrad. And here we get d4, knight f6, c4 at e6. So very flexible move order from black. Knight f3 could go to many places here, queens, Indians. But here even bogos, I guess that's called. But here we got the d5. Now we go transpose back to the queen's gambit. I guess g3 could turn this into some kind of a Catalan instead. But knight c3 definitely does make the queen's gambit declined. And Karpov just plays bishop e7, ready to castle. And white goes bishop g5. No trades here. So the bishop is still locked in. Black just castles. He's gonna most always castle kingside. So why not? And e3 is solidify our center and get this bishop out. So defend our c pawn. Alright, h6 usually is a pretty handy dandy move to question this bishop a little bit. See where it wants to go. And then, since the bishop has no future at this route, go and Fingado it to b7. The Tartak covered defense. And white develops here, ready to castle. And after bishop b7 we get this little funny looking move, bishop takes f6. It's played here a lot of times. Basically we want to, now that the bishop has committed to this side, white wants to take here and kind of lock it down basically. But if you do it without taking here, then black could take with the knight and keep this bishop open. Some ideas with c5 and has a somewhat free game. Of course he has no central pawns, but he has some ways to attack white center and he has a nice development and pretty free position. Everybody's playing. Okay, that's still undeveloped, but it's coming out. So here we take here first, and here of course black could take with the bishop, but then you have a huge holes left behind. The knight takes and then he takes, and there's something white can work on. So usually you take with the pawn instead, but then the bishop is of course a little bit sad behind the pawn structure there. And there white plays b4, playing against the c5. I mean c5 could still be possible because this of course loosens the knight here and there is a bishop here, so you could technically probably go here and take and white can't really retake anymore because of the pin here. But on the other hand, you'll probably end up with a isolated pawn there. Not sure this is the best version of it for black. Anyways, this might also have the idea of pushing to b5 and kind of restrict black's play a little bit. So he plays c6 and stops that nonsense. I mean, I guess he could still do it, but instead we play castles. And black, instead of playing with the knight, it's not really obvious where the knight could be coming here. Most of the, I guess it could use this route somehow to come to here. I don't know how useful the e6 square would be for the knight, nor g6. So it's for time being stands there where it thinks where it's gonna go. Well, yeah, white has to do something about it. He could play b5 here. But then again, c5, and this could be a little awkward. There's a lot of games that have gone this way though. Knight e5, planting the bishop, and then something like take here. And this is somewhat of a quite popular line. Queen g5. Here is the theory move is something funny like bishop g4 instead of a bishop f3. That looks much more logical, but this kind of does run into the knight d7, I think. Hitting this now twice, defending this. I mean, about equal-ish. We got completely different from the game. I just played a3. Wants to keep his bind here, even though it's not really a bind, since black can always play the c5 if he wants to. Right, instead that queen hits the b4 and white defends that. Then we trade on b4 twice, and then the knight comes to d7. There's always ideas with the b6 here coming towards here. On the other hand, your bishop would be extremely sad behind that pawn structure here. White plays a little bustling move. Rook f d1, kind of like, dude, why didn't you go to the half-open file here? But it's more maybe I mean, it does overprotect d4. Sometimes it also attacks d5s maybe. Just in case something c5ish would happen. I'm not sure c5 is a threat at the moment, since the bishop is undefended behind here. But maybe for the future. On the other hand, on c1, it's not clear how white could ever add the pressure on the c6 pawn. Anyways, the rook's not gonna stay there long, because chop chop. And finally we're in the a file. And the bishop drops to e7, hitting b4. I mean, white has an isolated pawn. Black has the bishop pair. Two pawn islands, 2 pawn islands. Should be equalish. This bishop is still a little question mark what to do with it. Now white's gonna really ask that question and goes and attacks that. Just not defend here because we attack the then bishop here. And notice that not only the one bishop, but we also hit the knight in behind it. So even though this hangs, that would be too many pieces dropping. So black can't do that. Instead, he just plays rook b8. Defends the bishop. Solid, solid. And now white defends the b4. It's not really probably easy for coming up with kind of a plans. Again, the c5 is not coming because we take, and then the bishop again would be hanging on b7. So Karpov just moves the bishop to c8. Rook's defended, so maybe c5 is now on the cards here. So white sidestep that. c5 maybe could be playable here, but Karpov does not do it. We've covered this a lot of times. But instead, plays the bishop f6. No commitment yet. And white now at this moment maneuvers the knight to a better square, to d3. This drops, but if black would take it, then white can take here, and we have the knight covering there. Also the bishop can always drop back. So this one would be not good, and we are hitting this twice here. Say knight would come here, and then this is a very nasty double attack. Still no back rank, even though white's position looks a little bit shaky on there. Back rank holds just enough. So can't take here. That would be too much to allow. Instead, Karpov just keeps on maneuvering. So the bishop is now free to maybe someday come here. Okay, can't come here, but maybe g6 and then come here. Well, white goes to d3. Eyeing this square for the knight, and also keeping an eye on the c5. And Karpov just comes and says, pinned. And white goes away. Still completely equal. Nothing to go. c5 over it's now defended a lot of times. Of course, the back rank still a little shaky there, but at the moment I don't think it would even open up, because we can take here and take with the knight. Well, also we have this covered, so we could take with the pawn too. Alright, the knight comes to this side instead, going here. Sure where it's going, maybe here, just defend the rook extra. And also maybe support c5, possibly. And white trades the rooks off. Which is, I don't know if was that the smartest idea. White's rook is a little bit more active than this guy, so it's possible, but you remember that black does have the bishop pair, can massage this position forever. Exactly in Karpov style. Neither side has any kind of advantage at the moment. Queen comes to a3, looks at this, x-rays this, in case of some c5s. There's no taking, since this is a check. Also, you don't really want to give up the bishop pair unless extremely necessary. So we just defend our bishop. And white goes to b7. Maybe x-raying this guy, that guy. Again, now it's not check, but the knight would be hanging here. Can't steal a pawn. So we come a little closer, just improving the defending everything. We defended this, now we defend this. Make it all solid before we do anything fancy. White makes a loft. And black says can't play g4. Not sure why it would have played it, but no. Is that square weakening relevant? Probably not, since the bishop is holding that well. Just so we have this bishop here. Looks pretty good on f5. White does nothing. And black maneuvers. Maybe freeing the knight to do stuff. Maybe the knight could come here. But instead we just go and offer a queen trade. And white says no. Doesn't want to go for this kind of a... White has a... Well, probably black has an easier way of making passed pawn on this side. They have the bishop there, so it's a bit annoying. It definitely should be holdable with a good play, but I don't know if people... I mean, I don't know if Karpov's reputation was that great, that well known at that time yet. He was up and coming monster, but his massaging technique, where he just moves, maneuvers and maneuvers and grinds people down, was probably not that known at that time yet. Anyways, knight goes to e5. Hitting c6, so even though it does drop this pawn, we are hitting this guy. And that's what happens. Black takes the pawn, white takes c6, and then we get the queen trades. Bishop is hit, but black has two isolated pawns. On the other hand, he also has a passed pawn. Still has his bishops too. Saves the bishop, and white goes and puts the bishop into the blockade square. Unnecessary yet, but possible. So now we get to the long maneuvering phase. Small improvements. I don't know if white has any active plans. How would he be able to attack, for instance, this pawn? It's very hard to achieve. We don't have b1. We don't have c8. Well, let's see how we get to break the blockade on b5. White plays f3, takes away some squares. Maybe we think about playing e4 and making our center roll. But Karpov just goes and attacks the bishop. And bishop drops back. And this bishop gets on this side of the pawns just in case they start to roll. King f2. And bishop goes to a4. Also, you start to look at a little bit like, this square is covered, this square is covered, this square is covered, this square is covered. How about we just run the pawn? But it's maybe a little too early. But it looks pretty scary though. I'll give you just roll it. You have the bishop d1 here to save the day, hitting the pawn. Can't go forward without taking, and this square is well covered. So I don't know, this would probably would have been a premature, and the pawn would probably just drop off. So we prepare stuff first. Bishop a4. Knight goes to e5. Here of course you could maybe think about taking, but it's not ideal. Karpov prefers to keep the bishops, even though it would double there, but also it might expose the ISO line here a little more. Anyways, he advances the pawn at least once. Knight d3, still possible to go forward. instead h4 first, restricting this side. Maybe giving on a check at some point could be possible. Not sure if that's a real threat. The bishop is here. It's much more relevant square. Advance the pawn. But it still feels a little hard to do with just the pieces. The king is out of the play. But Karpov slightly maneuvers. Now there's this funny pattern here. This bishop is coming to c4 where it looks pretty nice and solid. Notice that the bishop c2 was not really trapping the knight because white still has the bishop d3 to save the day. But yeah, this is definitely dominating the other knight. And taking here on the other hand also just further pushes the passed pawn even further away, so it might be even harder to stop. Anyways, this is white's blockade of choice. And then they play e4. Does expose d4 a little bit though. For the knights and the... Well, the bishop can't really come here, but maybe someday. Well, black plays g5. Restricts something, but white takes. Here, for instance, something like e5 would run to this kind of setup where you still can hold on to this, but then knight comes to f4 instead, and then bing bang. Can't come back here, and if you take there, then we just take here, and now the pawns are just gonna bully those knights while they run away. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. The knights are very clumsy at this moment, trying to stop that pawn. So white took here. Now he has an isolated pawn of his own. But at least he gets the knights going again. Keeping these guys stuck. Guarding the b5 because it attacked twice. Black plays bishop d7. Still doesn't really threaten anything. But maybe someday we threaten to take and start to push again. But white gives up the pressure here. Not sure I was that smart. But on the other hand, what else can he do? Only thing that moves is the king. Well, bishop too. Getting ready to now move the pawn. Instead of sitting passively, white decided to be more active. Hits the pawn here. Black frees this pawn, defends that pawn. And then they play knight c5, which probably was the last blunder, the blunder that lost the game. Because he can't really hold on to this pawn after bishop takes. Instead of this, he should have just kept on maneuvering. Knight e3 or something, but after this he can't really hold on to the c5 pawn. It's blockaded, but after knight e6 there's nothing you can do about it. You can attack this pawn, and after it moves forward you can defend this pawn, but then f5 happens, and then oops, can't hold on to it anymore. And the even worse thing is that this taking discovers the defended f5 here. And yeah, the pin doesn't work because the knight can just take and defend the bishop also. Well, that's what happened, but yeah, b4 knight e4. And here, well, here Karpov could have played f5 and just taken the pawn, but instead he just pushed the pawn instead. Knight goes and attacks the pawn. And here we take while attacking this guy. Defend this. Bishop dropped back to b1. King comes to f6. Backs up a pawn. It's a bit well advanced pawn too. And after king e3, white actually lost on time, I think. But it was completely hopeless task anyhow. King e5 or bishop f5. Let's say takes. Go attack these guys, but then you can might probably lose the b pawn, but then you gain the other side. Something like that could have happened. But I assume this moment, or I don't know why, since there is a white move. But he probably moved and lost on time. But yeah, it was beyond saving. Until next time. Ciao.